All right. So hello, everybody. Welcome to another ClearAngel Live. Today, we've got Aaron Lepcha from Mission Source. He's one of our early kind of supply chain consultants that we talked to a lot when we were first starting ClearAngel and trying to decide on what supply chain features we would like. Aaron has a lot of experience basically building his own products and finding creative ways to source them from around the world. And I think, Aaron, we'll talk about this, and I'm going to ask this question later, but you once told me you never start a project unless it has, what was it, like a 95% margin or something like that? Like Aaron is very good at finding very high margin products and getting them sourced from around the world. So we got a lot of good questions from the group that I'll sort of start asking you through. And yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything, and then I'll get started.
Yeah, I'll just introduce myself. So I started in the space of consumer electronics about 10 years ago. And through that process, I learned a lot about working with supply chains around the world, the different nuances in dealing with them, and also creating strong relationships and strong vendor partnerships, along with logistics at the end. So recently we've more been geared towards helping others as well, because we understand that navigating this kind of world is sometimes different, especially with communication barriers as well. And we've been really successful in this. And when Kent mentioned earlier that for our own business, we only really go after products with high margins. It's just the way our business is set up. That might not be the same for everybody. And that's because other companies have different resources where maybe their marketing is very, very strong. They can yield a high volume of product, so they don't need as big of a marginal increase for each individual unit. But for us, that's something that we keep in mind when we're sourcing. But yeah, that's kind of an intro to what we do here, and happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll get it started, and then feel free to just go ahead and throw it in the chat there as things go. As things come up here. So I think I want to start right away, kind of like the by far the biggest question we got was around like, I think everyone thinks of Alibaba when they think of, supply chain and trying to get started themselves. And I know you really spend a lot of time with us and with me, sort of training me on the pros and cons of Alibaba. So I think I'll just start with, like, if you find if you found something on Alibaba, is that a good place to start? Is it like, what do you have to watch out for? Is it a total scam? Like, are you always getting ripped off? Like, these are kind of the questions that, if you go on the forums, there's a lot of worry that, now maybe it used to be good, but now it's just full of 20 layers of middle people trying to mark things up. So how do you look at Alibaba, and is it something that founders, it should be in their toolbox, or should it be avoided at all costs?
Yeah, I'll never 100% say to remove anything from your toolbox. Definitely always keep options open. Alibaba, years ago was a really, really good option. It kind of gave a window into China's manufacturing process, like abilities, and then direct to manufacturers as well. But what we've seen within the last 5 years or so is that the manufacturers are stopping to handle the questions from customers directly. They're starting to outsource that, because I think for them, it's more a business case for them to focus on the production of whatever it is that they produce, whether it be textiles or electronics or whatever it is that they're manufacturing. And so now you have other large companies that maybe have thousands of employees that specifically cater to these manufacturers in terms of a sales and customer service on the customer service side. So that kind of creates a challenge, because what happens is now the business structure is more incentivized to be transactional rather than a long-term relationship. Because if you're a third-party agent or a third-party individual working for a company that's an agent for another manufacturer, you're incentivized to close the sale, to get the revenue in, take your piece out and pay the manufacturer, right? And then, you know, a lot of the times they wash their hands of the deal after it's done. Another issue is you can have people on Alibaba posing as a company that does certain things, but they don't actually do anything. They will source it to a friend of theirs, and then their friends will source it to the actual manufacturer. So there's really many layers in between. And what happens then is it usually just drives costs up and also breaks communication between what your expectations are of whichever product it is and what you end up receiving at the end of the day. And there's a lot of nuance in that. And communication is the key. So I wouldn't say don't use Alibaba. If you do find a product on Alibaba that is what you need, definitely keep it in terms of definitely reach out. You can speak to them and see where it is, but don't stop looking for alternatives in other mediums as well.
Well, and I know part of the thing that we're working on with Mission Source for our angel customers is trying to basically give people access to more that next layer down, right? Yeah. That next, getting at the sourcing agent, so that you don't necessarily, like you say, talk to somebody who's just passing your order to somebody else and to somebody else and things like that. So, but you're saying though, it is a good place to start, where if you were looking for, I was talking to a skincare company the other day, they're looking for a new bottle, you would still, would you start that journey on Alibaba to go look at all the different bottles you could find? And then ideally, I think when we launch our project with you, you could probably give you that bottle, and then you might be able to do something with it. But is that you should start your journey there, though, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and the reason why is because I look at Alibaba kind of as a giant catalog of possible items in terms of capabilities, right? So if it's on Alibaba, it means someone in China or wherever the manufacturer is has a capability of doing this. And by using that, then you can try and source different vendors that also supply the same product. So I don't not start there. From our personal business, because we do a lot of design work, what they call ODM, original design manufacturing, we wouldn't start on Alibaba, right? But if you have a web store and you're selling, let's say, customized coffee mugs or paraphernalia like that, it's not wrong to start at Alibaba, because then you can see the different shapes and styles of coffee mugs that are available, the different technologies that they use to actually customize these mugs and things like that. And it gives you an idea of what's possible from a manufacturing standpoint.
I like that. So it's almost like you're using it as the way they talk about, people use Pinterest to it's almost like the recipe ideas. And then so you're saying you don't have to get married to buy. So if you see some really interesting package, or you see some interesting dispenser or some kind of thing, that somebody can make this. Yeah. And you're not necessarily tied to buying it from that person. It just adds to your repertoire. Hey, this thing exists, and now I know that I can present my product in this way, or I could. Okay, that's exactly really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see that it exists, and likely if it already exists, there are multiple manufacturers and vendors that can offer you that same product.
Gotcha.
They won't spend the time to market it and put it on Alibaba and try and sell it if it wasn't something that was doing well. So, and if it's something that does well, that means that there are multiple manufacturers that do it. Now, something to keep in mind also is, maybe we'll get to this later, actually, it's in regards to quality and quality control and supply chain. I don't know if you want.
Go for it. Yeah, tell us. Yeah. What do you?
Yeah. So something to be aware of is that there's usually 3 or 4 levels of quality to any product that you buy. It could be blue jeans, could be coffee mugs, like I mentioned earlier. There's usually A, B, C, and D stock, right? And it comes down to the quality of the final product, the materials that they used for that product. And depending on that, you could, if you order, let's say 1,000 coffee mugs, you can get 4 vastly different prices. And that's really interesting, because most people think, well, if you just order a ceramic coffee mug, then you're going to get a ceramic coffee mug, and they're all generally the same. However, because a lot of materials are also made overseas, they can mix cheaper materials in to make the coffee mug, as an end user, less reliable, as in it could break easier and things like that. But that will lower their costs from a manufacturing standpoint because they're paying less for materials, and they may not necessarily communicate that with you. You just said, hey, I want this great coffee mug and I want this logo on it, or any design, but I don't want to pay X amount. I want to pay less. Like, no problem. We'll give you exactly what you want. But in the end, you might not be happy, depending on your brand and your company and what your policies are in terms of returns and things like that. Something to look out for.
Well, and I think that's so interesting because one of the things you taught me really like early on and kind of really blew my mind was around how pretty much everything you see, all the good stuff you see, all the junky stuff you see, it's all made by the same people at the end of the day. And it's a matter of, there are these different levels of like, so, I'll always be sending Aaron pictures of really nice packaging that I've seen. And I said, okay, if I wanted to offer this to our founders, and he'll laugh and be like, oh no, we can get that packaging from anywhere. You just have to, that's called this kind of compressed cardboard. It's just a different quality than the standard stuff you're going to see on Alibaba, for example. And I guess, like, how do you help founders navigate, or even yourself, like as you were learning this whole process, like, is it just a matter of when you find the great coffee cup, do you just have to ask, hey, tell me, like, give me your whole range of quality, and like, you just have to ask? Does it tell you flat out, and we just don't know how to read it on the listing? Or do you have to, which I think I kind of know where you might go with this, is like, do you have to actually order 10 different kinds and actually touch them, feel them, put coffee in them, see if they fall apart, see if they leak? Like, how do you start to make those decisions when all of our founders are tight for time, they're tight on money? Like, how do you help collapse those decisions for them?
Yeah, so it's a little bit more of a complicated question than it sounds, but I'll give you an example. Let's say stainless steel, right? We use stainless steel for a lot of things. There are about like 5 or 6 different grades of stainless steel. 304, right, which is just like normal kitchenware. 316, which is pharmaceutical grade, like they'll use it to make scalpels and things like that, right? And so on and so forth. And there's alloys and different grades of materials. So I think to circumvent the issue that you're posing here in terms of receiving a product that's subpar to your expectation, it all comes down to the communication. And that's where in Alibaba is difficult to work with, because a lot of the agents on there are essentially transactional, and English is probably not their first language. The communication breakdown happens often, and sometimes it's very difficult to communicate your exact expectations. But if you know, as a purchaser, exactly what it is that you want. So let's say you want ceramic coffee mug, and you've done the research on the back end to understand if there are different grades of ceramics available, and you know which grade that you want, you can specify that. Right. And they're pretty much obligated to fulfill that and price you on that.
That's interesting. So there's more research upfront on, or if we can almost think of like a playbook, like a 1, 2, 3. It's like you would find so you start your inspiration, you go for your walk on Alibaba, you find your coffee mug, you look at the materials and you say, oh, this is ceramic. Then you might start a separate research on Google or on other places to say, okay, are there different kinds of ceramic? Because you're right, there's probably like medical grade ceramics versus kitchen grade. And then when you go back to make that request, you're going to say, hey, I don't want like, toy, I want this medium level or something like that. And then now they're going to realize you kind of know what you're talking about. They're going to give you a more accurate price.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of loop back to it, we've had instances where when we've talked to agents on Alibaba where they say, hey, our price is X amount because you get the highest quality, right? And they'll kind of hammer in on that and drive it home, but they don't provide specifics as to why is this more the best quality, right? And if you don't have the knowledge beforehand going into the negotiations as to what you're expecting and what you want, then maybe they're just upcharging you, you're not quite sure, right? They say it's the highest quality, it's $1 more per unit, and then they end up sending you something which is not what you wanted. So I would say one really good thing that I've done for our own business is actually look at competitors in the space that are already currently marketing and selling whatever product it is that you want to get into in North America, and see what the specifications for their product is, because that'll give you a really strong benchmark as to what is expected in the marketplace.
And how would you do that, Aaron? So let's say you found, like, what does that mean to find the specifications? So let's just go down the coffee mug.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny here. I have this coffee mug here. I've had this mug for 10 years. It is by far the best coffee mug. It is made of a higher quality of a ceramic. So if I wanted to figure out, like, and then here I have another, because I'm a coffeeholic. This is one I bought in Mexico. It feels like it's going to break if I wanted to figure out like what this was, where would I even start? How do I start to unpack that?
Yeah. So maybe on the bottom of the mug, it tells you something about the manufacturer. Maybe not coffee mugs itself, but other consumer electronics for sure will tell you something about where the product is from. Another thing is, like, there are laboratories that just do material testing, right? And they publish this research and information about different materials and the use cases for those materials. So it may not you may not find exactly what you want, but you can get a baseline knowledge of the different materials used, right, in that space, and then choose the quality that best suits what your application is.
That's really interesting. And is that something like, I never thought about that. Could we work with you afterwards? Like, are there like, that's something you could help our founders with, where there's yeah, I totally get it. Like, there's probably a lab where I could talk to them. I could wrap this up in a box, send it to them, and they're going to charge me some amount to say, oh, it's 5 millimeters thick. It's using this ceramic, and then you could literally take that spec and bring it to your Alibaba person and say, hey, I want a price based on this
product. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, application means everything, right? At the end of the day, for example, if you're creating a piece using stainless steel, and you know that people are going to be using it to put something in their mouth, or they're interacting with it in that way, you're probably going to want a higher grade of stainless steel, right? Because you don't want leaching or any issues like that happening. But if it's an ornamental piece like a keychain, you may not care as much about the quality of stainless steel that's being used.
Right.
Or having an understanding, baseline understanding of that, and communicating that well with whoever you're working with is really important.
That's interesting. Yeah. And there's a bunch of other questions we had. We were thinking about doing an entire other event. Maybe we'll have you back to do a whole event on packaging, because for those of you, like, Aaron has an entire, like, he has an incredible way of assembling. Like, I'm not going to say your products are like Apple, like, maybe they're not Apple level, but like, you definitely care about what it looks like when the person gets it and how they open it, and using interesting cardboard mechanisms and things like that. Like, you could teach a whole class on how to design boxes and stuff like that. But like, when it comes to things like packaging, is it the exact same rules apply? Like, is packaging in a different class, or do you treat it no differently than you would treat the actual material? Like, if you found a box that you got, would you be trying to figure out what material this box is made of? Do you use Alibaba? Is it like the exact same rules that apply to packaging, or is it a little different?
Yeah, it depends on your relationship with the vendor. I would say if you're dealing with Alibaba to get, we're just gonna keep along the lines of this coffee mug, I guess, example. If you're going to Alibaba to get coffee mugs, they probably won't be able to do the packaging for you in-house. They'll have to either bring in someone else or you'll have to find someone else, right? And then when you get both shipments in country at your location, you'll have to actually package it together while doing your own quality control.
Oh, right. You mean like you get the box, get the mug, and then you're going to assemble the final. Yeah.
They'll come in separate
Course,
shipments,
yeah.
right? Now you can have it where the coffee mug place also packages for you. Like they'll receive the packaging internally in China for you and do it all for you and then ship it over to you. But that'll cost a premium because that's not their normal business function. So any deviation from their normal, whatever it is that they do, they charge quite a bit more for. And then another thing is you have to keep in mind is that when you do receive the products landed, you're going to have to open them up anyways. You have to quality control everything that comes in anyways, because like the minute you ship it out, the last thing you want to deal with is a customer complaining about something and then you eating the cost to reship an item and or refund the price of the product, right? But what with the vendors that we work with now for our own projects, we have them deal with all the packaging in China. And then we have a quality control person in China go to the facility to double check all of our products before they even leave the country. The reason for that is we deal with a larger volume of products. So what we don't want is to pay, and right now, especially an exorbitant amount for shipping, skids over, and then having there be an issue with the quality of the product and having to ship it right back and have another, 2-month rollover until the product is actually available for sale again.
Right. And so that's something and did you always do that, or did you add that to did you start by quality inspecting everything yourself, landed, and then once you got to a certain scale, you paid for somebody to do it okay.
So I have family in Asia. So when we first started, I mean, this was over almost a decade ago now. When we first started, I would literally send family members over to the factory to check before, and then it got to a point where the number of pieces is just unreasonable to ask them to do that, and then we had to start looking for companies that would QC the product on our behalf rather than have their QC staff say, yeah, it's good, ship it, right? Yeah. But going back to your packaging, I completely didn't answer your question. But there are definitely different grades of packaging, 100%. It's the same thing as the coffee mug scenario where you do want to specify how thick is the cardboard, what's the DPI on the print on the packaging itself, what kind of finishes that they use, whether it be matte finish or UV gloss. All these things are really important because if you're building a brand or a company for the long run, that's usually the first physical interaction with your company that a client's going to have, and you want the best, impression, to give them the best impression of it, right? And it's the same course of action if that isn't done well. In the respect that if you receive it and it's not done well, you're gonna have to wait another 4 to 8 weeks before that is corrected,
right?
Which will cost you time, energy, money, right?
So let's talk about that, because I think something that we got a lot of questions at our last. We had Michelle on answering questions, and we got a lot of follow-up questions around like people are feeling like they need to launch new products, right? Everyone kind of knows, especially if you've got a store, if you're doing more traditional e-com, you've got your best-selling products, but if you're not innovating, if you're not launching new stuff, you're going to, your competitors will.
Yeah. And
that gets into things like timing, minimum order quantities, prototyping, and like all of a sudden you start thinking of, you have to run your business, you have to do all the logistics you're already doing. Now you have to start thinking about new products. You got to go engage in I know, and I've talked to you long enough to know that there is no one size fits all answer for this. So we don't need to, we could talk for, 6 months about this. So, but from a principles kind of perspective, is it, what should somebody, and again, I know it depends per industry, per material, but like just generally, if you had to sort of give a blanket rule, like when you go from idea to new product, what kind of time frame in your mind are you gearing yourself up for? What are you doing from a, like, how much do you think this is going to cost you
Mhm.
in a minimum order volume?
Yep.
And how does that change as you start to build? Because the next question we'll talk about is like, how do you actually build big, like real relationships with suppliers so you're not doing this transactional stuff? Because I know one of your secrets is it's much faster for you because you've essentially invested in your manufacturers and you trust them and they trust you, and
Yep.
they basically can do you favors. And like, how do you, so let's, I guess the first part is like, let's use our coffee, we'll use our coffee mug example, you know, so now you've had the successful coffee mugs and you want to start getting into like portable thermoses. So you're
Mhm.
going to launch a really cool portable thermos. Like, how much time are you in your head signing up for when you're like, I'm going to launch a new product?
Yeah. So that's actually really important, right? Understanding your business and how you interact with the marketplace. A lot of businesses that run on the momentum model, in terms of they create momentum for a product, eventually it fizzles out, they introduce a new product, eventually that momentum fizzles out, and they just kind of rinse and repeat this. Maybe they have a very strong brand, so they're able to do it. If you're running on that model, then you always kind of have to be looking for that next product to introduce, right? Now, if you're on the other side and you're really conceptualizing a new product from the ground up, like you've done your research, you've designed something that doesn't exist on the marketplace, your sales cycle will be actually much longer than the momentum play that we were talking about earlier. And the reason why is because it takes the marketplace much longer to catch up with you if you're the first to market with something that's innovative and ingenious, right? Someone else has to then, reverse engineer and recreate, and before they can even compete with you. And then you have the first mover advantage in that sense anyways. That's more of what we focus on here. But if you're taking the coffee mug scenario, if you've done really well with coffee mugs and then you want to transition to a new product like thermoses, I would already be looking for your next product as your current product is being sold, right? I would plan for about a quarterly timeline between a new product and an old product phasing out and the new product coming in, about every three to 4 months. Usually that's enough time for you to get samples in the door, to test them, to place an order, to get it fulfilled and landed at your door, usually 3 to 4 months. Now, if you're designing something from scratch, like an original design manufacturing relationship, which is what I do, you would budget for maybe half a year, right? Because you create an initial design, you send the files over to your vendor, they'll sample prototype it for you. They have to ship it back to you. You then have to test the actual product itself, make tweaks and changes and fixes to that product, send those fixes back until you get to where you feel your product should be as a final product, right? And that there's no like absolute rule there. Like usually for me, it takes about 6 months from original idea to go to market. But it could take less time. It could take more time. It really depends how many iterations you have to do and how many changes you make in between. Now, if a vendor believes that, and you've done work with them for a long time, and they know that once you land on the final design and product and you're happy that you're going to be a good customer for them, usually they'll eat the cost of prototyping whatever it is that you're doing within reason, right? Because it costs money to prototype. So maybe they'll say, okay, Aaron, you can have like 4 changes this round, right? Up to 4. So anything after that, you have to pay for the prototyping, right?
So on that, we got a few questions around like what are that's a really good piece of advice. Like I wouldn't have thought of that as being something you could negotiate. So when you're getting contracts from vendors, especially when and so much of the questions we got have the same, like I'd say this like aura of like confusion or like fear around you just feel like you're playing in this black box where chances are you're not gonna meet most of the people you're interacting with. They're in a totally different part of the world, in a different time zone, in a different culture. Like there's so much trust that has to be built, in non kind of traditional ways, that they feel like they can't negotiate, or they feel like they can super negotiate because they're never going to meet these people. So they become these like ultimate, like, hard asses, just like being completely ruthless. And then that isn't going to help build relationships. So like, where's that sweet spot where, like if I were to send you like a manufacturing contract and you were to look through it and look for like 2 or 3 areas that you typically see mistakes, or founders who are not asking for enough or asking for too much, like what are like a couple of those key areas you would focus in on?
Yeah, I would say if you're a startup and this is your first project, try and protect yourself as much as possible monetarily, right? So the way you pay is very important when it comes to an initial project. If you're paying somehow through a credit card or PayPal, or if you're using Alibaba, you can pay through their own system. There are protections in place from a buyer standpoint, baked into that, right? So if you've gone over the contract and it looks good to you in terms of all the agreements, and something on that contract when you've received the product hasn't been fulfilled, you have a course of action to rectify that, in terms of you can do a chargeback, you can threaten a chargeback and say, hey, listen, you promised me this material, the handles are falling off, it's obviously not that material, I want all this money back. They'll probably say, no, don't like give us a bad rating on Alibaba, don't do a chargeback on our PayPal, we'll just make it right and we'll send it to you immediately, we'll cover the shipping costs, and they'll try and make things right. And that's usually how it works. But in terms of things to look for in the contract, I think if you can just be as detailed as possible in all your like take everything from your communications with the vendor and put it into the contract, right? What is it that you're ordering? How many pieces? What is the material made of? They put a photo of or a rendering of the product that you're expecting in the actual invoice itself? What color is it going to be? So on and so forth. And then also the vendor relation in terms of what are the payment terms? Do I pay 30% up front and then 70% when it's done manufacturing? Or is it a 50-50? They need 50% to get started.
And what is a good, like, what would you think a founder should be spending upfront versus on delivery? Like what does a typical split look like, or what should they be shooting for?
Yeah, so usually it's a 30-70 split, 30% deposit, 70% upon completion. And I would suggest that before you make the final 70% payment, that you get as many photos, videos, or video chat of the product itself, them interacting with it. If it's coffee mug, say pour coffee into it, or hot
Interesting.
water.
So you would actually say, let's go on a video chat.
Yeah.
Show me the mug and pour coffee into this mug, and I want to see if it is
falls apart.
Okay.
Yeah, so you could even say, take a abrasive cloth and rub it on the side of this mug. See if the paint's going to come off. See if the logo that you put on there.
Interesting. So you'll do this with you'll just like on a video, just on WhatsApp, you'll be like, hey, I want to.
Don't usually WeChat though, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, actually, let's talk about that. So once on Alibaba, of course, you're using that chat system. Once you start actually talking to, once you build a relationship, is it WeChat that you're primarily using when you're talking to people in China?
Yeah. So when I'm dealing directly with an agent for myself, or with a direct to the manufacturer, it's usually on WeChat.
Interesting.
Yeah, 90% of the time.
I'd never thought about like actually asking them to, and then of course, if they said no, that would be a very clear sign that you probably shouldn't be working with this vendor. Like they would be willing to do that stuff.
It's not necessarily a clear sign, because it's like us with Facebook, right? Everyone has Facebook. Everyone has WeChat in China. So they'll say, sure, here's my phone number and add me on WeChat and we can chat on there instead, right? It's just a different platform. The more of the red
Sorry,
flag.
but I mean, like, if they weren't willing to do a video where they test your product,
Oh yeah,
if they said like, no, you can't call me and I'm not going to pour coffee in this mug, that would
yeah,
be a sign for you to say like, well then,
yeah.
why are we working? Like,
Especially if you're past the point of because if you here's the thing, if you use PayPal to pay or Alibaba to pay or any one of these processors, you're paying around like 4 or 5% service fee on top, right? That comes directly out of your bottom line. So eventually you don't want to be doing that. You want to be wire transferring the manufacturer, the vendor, or your agent to deal with the project, because it's a much less of a cost, especially when you start getting into the tens of thousands of dollars per transaction, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't want to pay 5%. It doesn't make any sense. You want to send a wire transfer over, right? But yeah, if you're at the stage where you don't have recourse if something were to go wrong, as in you've wired the money 30% and then 70 and then eventually 70%, and if you're to receive it and there's something wrong with it, there's no way for you to get your funds back. I would demand a video chat. I would demand anything that you need to make yourself feel comfortable that the product is good to leave their country and come to yours.
right.
I would do that. And then another, like kind of like what we touched upon in the beginning, was have someone physically there that is working on your behalf to look over, if you're at the size where it makes sense to do so,
Gotcha.
to look over the products. Yeah.
And so that sort of goes into, it kind of ties very nicely to another question that we got from a few people around, I mean, COVID has changed so much, but like, it used to be that, you know, you would hear even smaller founders say like, hey, I'm going to Asia to go tour factories. And I'm going to, you know, either make I'm going to make my selection, or I've narrowed it down to 5 and now I'm going to go pick visit the one while I'm there. You know, and so one is like, how important is that to actually go? Can that be accomplished just by like, would you ask them to just give you a tour virtually now of their facility? Like, let's pretend COVID didn't exist. Like, I know you have to get to a certain size before you're going to drop, you know, $10,000 on a trip over to the other side of the world. But like, is it really important? Is it a nice to have? Can you get by up until a certain point without actually visiting the factory floor? Like, how do you sort of see, or like, because I think what I want to make sure our founders here is like, sometimes these things become competitive advantages. So you might have a competitor out there who's lapping you, running circles around you. And one of the secrets is, oh, well, they actually make visits to their supply chain and build really strong relationships. And as much as that sucks to hear that, sometimes that is the case, that you do have competitors that are hyper investing in their supply chain, even when they're that much younger. So what do you think about that?
I would say if you're first starting up and it's like a proof of concept in terms of your business, you don't need to do that. Like if you're literally just thinking, okay, I want to try this and sell it on e-commerce, you don't need to take a trip over there. Just the strong communication and clear indication of what it is that you expect and having that on a contract should be enough to cover you. And then also having the recourse if something were to go wrong. Right. But as you grow, it definitely is an advantage to go over. And it's also dependent on the space that you're working in. Right. Like, I know we've been talking about coffee mugs, but people make nutritional supplements. Right. People make things that people are consuming. So making sure that your supplier has the necessary certification, whatever lab or HACCP certification that they need for you to actually sell it, being able to physically go there, look over the facility, and making sure everything is above board is really important. And you could also use as a marketing piece as you're selling your products as well, to say, hey, like, this stuff is made in an ISO environment or whatever it might be, right? But it is important as you grow to establish those relationships, because assuming that when you grow, you're going to be working with vendors that have that capability, they're also going to have other clients as well. You're not their only client. So if they have a better relationship with you, and they have two projects that come in around the same time, you might get bumped earlier because they have a good relationship with you. And there's always nuances to everything, but yeah, relationships do matter. Obviously, right now during the pandemic, you can't necessarily just fly over and travel. So there's other ways to communicate, like we talked about already. But if you're at the size where it makes sense to go over, it's definitely a bonus. It's definitely a good thing to have.
Yeah. Sorry, Perry, I just saw you ask a question about pick and pack. Yeah, go for it. Aaron knows a lot about pick and pack as well. Fire away if you have a question.
Okay. Okay. So thank you for this. One of our main concerns is, so all this stuff was very interesting for sourcing the components of what we manufacture, which is natural health supplements. Mm-hmm. So we may be sourcing like the bottles from overseas, or up to now we've been doing it in Canada because our order sizes are not huge. And usually when you calculate the shipping and everything, it's just better to get it from somebody that's right here and you can see a sample first. All that quality is very important. But one thing that has really stumped us and is, I can say, even preventing us from growing, is the high cost of shipping inside of Canada. It's even worse than sending from Canada to the States. So it's cheaper to send from here to New York City than to send from here, Mississauga, where we are, to Calgary or British Columbia, God forbid. That's like, ooh, $15, $16 for a bottle like this, that like, okay, I'm selling it for $30. How can I spend $15 on shipping? And people love free shipping.
Yeah.
So this is really one of the things that has pushed us to accept Amazon terms, because even though Amazon is charging 15% and then they have the shipping, for shipping is like $5-6 on top of the 15%. But when we calculate the cost of pick and pack right here in the warehouse that handles our operations in Mississauga, that pick and pack and shipping cost, when it comes all together, is more expensive than 15% Amazon plus shipping on Amazon. So we're like, okay, let's just focus on our Amazon. If we even improve our website sales, we're still not going to make more money. But the problem here is that Amazon now has control of all of our clients and customers, and we have no data of who is buying this. And any day that they feel like they don't like to have this product up there, they can just turn it off, and now you're left, with nothing.
Yeah, or they will create a competitor to you, and that's it, right?
Yeah. So this is a really, it's huge for us. I think for a lot of smaller businesses that don't have thousands of orders a day. Yeah. So we're at the point of about 1,000 orders a month.
Yep. That's which isn't bad. That's very good, actually. I know that pain, Pari.
Canada Post, UPS, FedEx, we have looked into all of it. Yep. It just is very expensive. So what do you do for that?
Yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about. For me to ship something to New York State would cost me $7 or $8. For me to ship to BC, like you said, maybe like $14, $15. And I get about an 80 to 85% discount on FedEx off retail rates.
It's still
so I know exactly what you're talking about. Now there are these companies out there that essentially what they do is they create one master account for each of the different couriers, right? So they'll have one account for Canada Post, for FedEx, UPS, Canpar is one as well, right? Yeah. They also piggyback off Canada Post. And then what they do is they're just like a pick and pack facility, but they have multiple clients. And so from that, they get to expand how many volume of packages they get. And usually they'll pass those savings on. I'm not sure if you've explored that yet, like companies that do that.
So far, we're working with our own warehouse and logistics, that the company that does all our logistics. So they're a smaller logistics company, but they offer a very personalized, experience. They pay a lot of attention to you, even though you're not a huge company.
Yeah.
At any point in time, you have just a few pallets. You don't have a full warehouse of goods, but they still give you that time and attention and a specific account manager. What we're afraid of is like, if we move to those bigger facilities, will we get that kind of attention?
Well, are you running currently on their shipping contract, or are you running on your own?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, we give everything to the warehouse and logistics company that we're working with, and they're local. They're in Mississauga, so they both have warehousing and they do logistics, which includes the pick and pack.
Oh, okay, I understand. And so the rates that you're seeing are from them.
Yeah, but it's still
Okay.
high. It's
And
still,
it is still high. And that may be just the case, right? Is because they do cater to smaller clients and provide a really good relationship. Maybe their volume isn't so high that the couriers are giving them
it isn't.
a really
So
good price, right?
sometimes I even, like, we spend some time comparing the rates, and for example, I create a shipping label on my Shopify platform on my end, and this is what Shopify gives me. It's like $12.87. How much do you see on your end? And they're like, it's the same, or it's like
Okay.
maybe 20 cents less, not much more, because I know they're a small facility. They
Right.
don't have, a lot of clients, and especially for pick and pack, it's like us and one other company that they're doing pick and pack. The other ones are more like, just stocking there and then sending out wholesale orders and
Right.
pallets, not pick and pack.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if it comes to a point where we can't grow because we can't get, like, is there anywhere that can give us that $5 rate for Canada that Amazon has?
It's difficult, especially right now with COVID, right? We've seen our shipping rates go up 30, 40, 50% as well, right?
Okay.
And that's not just for outbound, that's also for inbound. So when receiving products, so I'm sure when you need to receive things, you're paying more for shipping right now. The reason why is just there's less travel happening, there's less movement for ships and planes and things like that. And so the amount of space is limited, and people are flocking towards e-commerce, shopping online. So the demand is really high, the supply is really low, and the demand is very high. And so this is what we see, right? So I'm not sure exactly how to fix like the exact shipping rate until you get to a certain size where you can negotiate that. But maybe like, and this is kind of what we did when we were first starting out, was we focused a lot of our marketing, advertising, and sales in our local region. We took care of home and we increased the volume, and we've charged everyone a flat rate, let's say $10 Canadian, regardless if you're in BC, regardless if you're in Ontario or in Mississauga as well. $10 flat rate across the country, right? And what happens is, if you have an influx in business in your local area and you're paying $7 shipping and you're making $3 on every shipment, then it helps to offset some of the costs when you're shipping out to BC. And it might not be a complete wash in terms of, right? It might not balance.
Yeah, well, I've done that. I've done the $10 flat for all of Canada, and I think the US as well. So that just makes it simpler.
Yeah.
And my cutoff point is $50, because however which way I calculate on a product that's less than $50, if I give free shipping, I'm just not going to make any money. Like, it's just like a product's that $30 or something like that. But like, I have product that's $65, $70. That's okay. I can absorb, the shipping into whatever it is in the markup. We don't have 95% at all, but well, it's like a different industry.
Yeah.
So far, that's all I've been able to do. So my cutoff point is $50. I don't know if it's a good place or not. Some I know have $100. I just wanted it to be like not a complete turn off for people that, like, my main product sales is a product that's around 70. I have most of my sales from that. I just didn't want to lose the sales from this one. And it also has a nice markup that I can absorb the $10 or $12 shipping, or 15 sometimes when it's
Yeah.
BC. But
What's interesting about your question, like what's interesting about it is because you're in the growth stage right now for your business, right? So there are these growing pains that come with it, unfortunately. And sometimes it takes like these sacrifices in terms of saying, okay, anything going out to the West Coast, I'm essentially not losing money on, but I'm not really making a lot of money on it, like 5% margin or so, right? Which is not great. However, if you can keep and gain customers in those regions, if you project it over 2 years, maybe then your volumes are at, like as from a whole country perspective, then your volumes are at a rate where the couriers will give you a better rate, and or the pandemic ends and shipping goes back to normal rates, and that would be nice as well, right? But you kind of have to make the decision as to, can I grow my volume to where shipping rates come down, right? Am I going to eat like or not make as much in certain regions because of the shipping costs? Or can I make my product cheaper to bring in house? So is there anything I can do so that my cost of the product itself comes down? So maybe it is that your purchasing operations change a little bit. Instead of running on a quarterly repurchasing plan, you say, I'm going to invest heavier and go 6 months. So you're buying more volume, so you bring the cost of your product down. Or a year. It depends how validated you are and whatever it is that you're selling, obviously, right? So there's different ways to like tackle and look at the situation to try and find a solution. But it is like, it's very
bring down the cost, increase volumes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you can either or do both, right?
Both.
If you, yeah. So
and I think, and I want to make sure we get Carrie's question here too. And Perry, I'll just sort of say, so Aaron and I, we've worked together in the past, and I used to have an e-commerce business, and he was much tougher on me. So I'm going to give you the advice that he gave me. I think he's being very nice. Essentially, it's almost like laws of physics, the way Aaron would describe it to me before, where it's like, unfortunately, when I hear what you're saying, you're all the reasons why you love your pick and pack is why it's so expensive. And ultimately, you either have to find a way to make that product cheaper, and which means sacrificing, like Aaron said, it's like you have to sacrifice your ingredients. Maybe you're not going to buy them locally. You're going to have to buy them from somewhere else, or maybe you're going to have to, you're not cutting corners, and there's a big difference, right? Like you're not cutting corners. You're just, to Aaron's point, finding those different areas or increasing your order volume to lower those. And I'm just thinking, I have one pick and pack, knowing that you're in Mississauga, that I'm going to introduce you to. They're phenomenal. They're a little bit bigger, but I know them very well, and they do great work. And it's just good to get other rates. I know they don't get Aaron's discounts, but they get good discounts, better than Shopify. And unfortunately, it's like you do have to kind of, you might have to trade that personal feeling and that good feeling you get with your pick and pack. And like that sucks. And the sad reality is, like, as vendors grow, they grow out of some of their initial partners. Aaron had to teach me that. He basically sat me aside and said, like, you're not making any money, and you never will, if you don't fix these two parts of your business. And I didn't want to hear that. But
that's what we're afraid of, that we're never going to make any money.
Right. And for me, what it was is I had to start buying bigger volumes, which was scary for me, because I had to put, much more thousands of dollars on the line than my little credit card amounts. And I also had to sacrifice my pick and pack. I had to go for a cheaper pick and pack. And I'm a control freak, and I didn't want to give up control, but that was the only way and Aaron was much harder. So Aaron, I don't know if that resonates, but like, I remember when you literally told me, like, yeah, you're never going to make money if you don't change these two things. So anyway, for what it's worth, I think like what Aaron said is, you're in this cool phase though. You're in that phase where you're solving those problems. Sorry, I want to make sure we get to Carrie's question, because I know, Aaron, I don't want to keep you too much longer here. So, Carrie, you have suggestions here around purchasing 1,000. Oh, here, Carrie, I'll let you go ahead and just ask your.
Yeah, I can read it here. Do I have any suggestions for a subscription company or maybe not looking to purchase 1,000s of one SKU because you're a subscription company, but not, yeah.
Yeah,
And
no, we
you don't
are.
want to necessarily, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So we send out thousands of boxes a month, and we're purchasing, for like 4 to 6 products for it. And what we're finding is that when we're asking, like, we're having difficulty because the volume that we need is not necessarily available. And so I was wondering if you had suggestions. Customers want products manufactured from other companies. They don't want a whole box of our stuff. So
yeah,
that was my
completely
question.
understood. Okay, so I don't know what industry you're in, but have you spoken to the vendors that you use? Have you spoken to their marketing departments?
No, not specifically.
Okay.
We are a book subscription box, so we
Okay.
include, so the
Okay,
book
books.
isn't the problem. It's we include sweets, tea and coffee, and then
Yeah.
other items. So
Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah, for the tea and so any of the consumables, maybe not the books, I would probably suggest reaching out to those companies, their marketing departments, because you're essentially introducing people to their brands.
yeah.
They should give you a reduced cost.
Well, we can't even get some of them to release the product to us. They'll say,
Oh,
well,
really?
you'll clear us out. And I'm like,
Oh,
it's not a good thing.
okay. Yeah, so that's really interesting. I've never heard of companies not willing to sell their product. That is rare.
It sounds like you almost need to, again, like every time I talk to Aaron, what I try to convince him is like, he has all these things that for him are like common knowledge, but for everybody else, they're actually like, they're not. And I think one of the lessons I would apply here, Carrie, is like, whatever you think you're buying from this company that's unique is actually not, I mean, sometimes it is unique, but it's probably not that unique in that, like, if you were to call that company and try to get X amount of this, I don't know if it's like some instant coffee, chances are there's another manufacturer who's making that exact same instant coffee who would love to sell you 10,000 units of.
Yeah, and I find the coffee and sweets is no problem. Like we have no
Okay.
problem there. It's more things like journals or items connected to the box. Like I'm just shocked at, like, and they want us to go through sales reps that sell to retail, but I am not retail. Like, I'm not. So I just wondered if you had any suggestions. Marketing's a great idea to go through.
Yeah. So I usually suggest that for people I work with that are doing subscription boxes that are more like consumables, where whatever it is that is in the box, they're actually brands that exist. Maybe they're smaller brands, less known. And so their marketing department usually is very interested in that, because now you're opening, like if you're, sending out hundreds of them, let's say, you're opening up the eyes of all these potential new customers that may buy their product at a different location in the future, right?
Yeah.
So that has worked for some of the people we've worked with in the past to get better rates on whatever. It's usually consumables, so it could be like Nestle for Kit Kat. Maybe they have a different flavor and they want to put in a subscription box for Tokyo treats, right? So all these candies and things from Japan. But when it comes to notebooks and things, I mean, if the brand isn't really important and it's something that you're constantly adding into your boxes, then I would maybe go back to that same model that I was suggesting earlier, is if you have conviction in it and it's something that you're going to use moving forward for a long time, then increase your purchasing of it to decrease your cost of each unit. Okay. Maybe you don't have to purchase 1,000 of them. I would start looking for different vendors that supply the same thing or similar thing. Because honestly, like here, I'll give you an example. This is from FedEx, right? This is a FedEx notebook. This is not unique. Anyone, I could put my face on here and sell it, right? It doesn't matter. So yeah, so there's always going to be an option for you to find someone that's willing to do the quantities that you're comfortable with, number one, and hopefully at a price point that you find reasonable as well.
Okay, I have to run. I have a meeting at 11:30. I'm so sorry.
Nice speaking with you.
And Jerry, I'll follow up with you to get. I'm sure Aaron can make some introduction for sure. he does a lot of that for us behind the scenes too. And we will be launching our supply chain pillar soon, and Aaron will be definitely a part of that. So
Wonderful.
Aaron, thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
And
Thank
yeah,
you.
we'll I'm sure we'll keep getting more questions, and I'd love to have you back on at a later time to keep picking your brain. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.